Chief Henry Standing Bear wrote to Korchak after reading the news stories. Chief Standing Bear was an educator and interpreter for the Lakota and hereditary chief of the Brule. In his early teens, he became one of the first Native Americans to attend Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania, where he took on the name of Henry, chosen at random from a list of names. As a result of attending Carlisle, Standing Bear concluded that in order to best help his people, it would be necessary to learn the ways of the non-native world. He began to develop leadership skills like public speaking and writing. He realized that the battle for cultural survival was no longer to be waged with weapons, but with words and ideas. He spent most of his life working for the social progress of Native people. After receiving the letter, Korchak spent 2 years carving his 13.5-foot tall Noah Webster statue at his studio in Connecticut, then volunteered for Army service during World War II. He landed at Omaha Beach and later was wounded. When the war ended, officials asked the sculptor to make war memorials in Europe, but Korchak had made up his mind, convinced that the story of the American Indian was an epic that deserved to be memorialized. He would accept the Dakota elders' invitation and dedicate the rest of his life to the Crazy Horse Memorial. Moreover, Korchak promised that the mountain carving would be the focal point of a vast cultural and educational humanitarian project.
To carve a mountain to a race of people that once lived here for maybe 150,000 years? What an honor. A little Polish boy from Boston. What an honor. And that's all I ever thought of.
Although Korchak originally wanted to carve the memorial elsewhere, the Lakota elders insisted their memorial be in the Black Hills, sacred to them for many generations. And the elders knew who they wanted to be the subject of the carving: the Lakota warrior Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse, Oglala Lakota, was born around 1840 near Rapid Creek on the edge of the Black Hills and grew up with the traditional ways of the Lakota, preparing him for his future life as a warrior for the tribe. He was not named Crazy Horse at first. He started out as Curly, possibly because he had wavy hair. Later, after he proved himself in battle, Curly earned his father's name, Crazy Horse, Tashunkawitko, which means his horse is crazy. In 1876, Crazy Horse led a band of Lakota warriors against Custer's 7th U.S. Cavalry Regiment. At the time, it was called the Battle of Little Bighorn, or Custer's Last Stand. Some Native Americans call it the Battle of the Greasy Grass. Many Native Americans look on that battle as a victory over a much larger force. After the battle, the U.S. government rounded up Northern Plains tribes that resisted. Crazy Horse continued to resist, and in 1877, under a flag of truce, Crazy Horse went to Fort Robinson, Nebraska. Negotiations broke down, possibly because of incorrect translations. As Crazy Horse was escorted to jail, he struggled and drew his knife, and his friend, Little Big Man, tried to restrain him. It's recorded that an infantry guard made a lunge with a bayonet and mortally wounded the great warrior. His parents transported him to his resting place, and the exact location is said to be a secret to this day. Chief Standing Bear and the elders were convinced Korchak was destined to carve Crazy Horse when they discovered he was born on September 6th. This was within hours of the date Crazy Horse died 31 years earlier. The elders saw the coinciding dates as an omen. Moreover, during his lifetime, Crazy Horse told his people he would return to them in stone. He often wore a protective stone talisman in his ear, depicted on Korchak's scale models. And so, in 1946, Korchak traveled to the Black Hills, and together, he and Chief Standing Bear chose the 600-foot mountain that would be carved. At first, he planned to carve just the first 100 feet, but the two men decided that the entire mountain would be needed to tell the story. The finished sculpture would be 563 feet high and 641 feet long. With that decision, Korchak knew he wouldn't live to see Crazy Horse completed. At that time, also, Standing Bear agreed with Korchak that the sculpture would not represent just one leader, but stand as a great symbol for the spirit of all Native Americans. When he moved to the Black Hills in May 1947, there was nothing but land and trees at the location. No water, electricity, roads, or money. Korchak lived in a tent the first 7 months while he hand-built roads and a place to live, making the log studio home from pine trees on the property. The dedication blast, June 3, 1948, was the only blast that year. Korchak single-jacked or hand-drilled the holes for the first blast, and it removed just 10 tons. The blast was touched off by Chief Henry Standing Bear Korchak and South Dakota Governor George T. Mickelson. 5 survivors of the Battle of Little Bighorn were among the special guests. Ruth Ross, a young volunteer who had helped raise funds for the Noah Webster statue back in Connecticut, had arrived in June 1947 to help with the memorial. She helped build the log studio home and the 741-step staircase up the mountain. Finally, work began on the mountain in 1949.
To imagine how humble I started on the mountain, I started with a single jacket, a hammer, and a steel. And I drilled my holes around 3-4 feet deep and blew them off. Then I bought an old compressor. It was 24 years old, no Buddha. Weighed around 4 tons. And I put a pipeline 2,440 feet long from the compressor on the ground to the top of the mountain. So for the first 7 years, I climbed up 741 steps, and I carried everything up on my back. When I go up, I stopped the big compressor. I used to crank it, you know, and I put a 50-pound box of dynamite in one shoulder, put a wire, a string of discs around my neck. Then I put maybe a native 10 or 12, 14-foot steel in my left hand, and that's how I started up the mountain. The old Buddha, the old compressor, was kind of decrepit, and I get sometimes part of the way up, and I just hear that thing go kaput, 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 kaput. Put everything down, walk all the way down the staircase, start it up again, crank it up. Just start to drill one hole, get down about a foot, and you can hear the big Buddha kaput, kaput, kaput. Down I go again. One day I did that 9 times. You know, that gets awful old. Oh, I tell you, that walk up and down there is terrible.
Ruth and Korchak married on Thanksgiving Day 1950. The following year, Ruth helped her husband start drafting 3 books of comprehensive plans for all aspects of the mountain carving, ensuring that the work would continue. The couple built and operated a large dairy farm and lumber mill at Crazy Horse to help sustain Crazy Horse through the difficult early years. Every winter, they added a room or 2 to the visitor complex, which also housed their growing family, which would total 10 children, 5 girls and 5 boys. Everyone helped with the multitude of chores at Crazy Horse.
You see why we had 10 children. They were all, the boys were necessary up on the mountain, and the girls were necessary down here to help mother with the visitors.
All I hope the living has is strong back, good mind, believe in living for other people. And since I started my life with just my hands, and all I ever think, I can only leave them the same area. It's up to them to make their own life.
I was bulldozing on the back side on one of the roads that we were building, and my dad was bulldozing down on the ramp lower, and the brakes went out of the cab, and I went off that edge, went over my dad, and the cat went all the way to the bottom, or the top of the mud pile. And I bailed out, and I went about 70 feet or so, I suppose. And my dad probably thought I was dead, but he turned around and looked, and there I was, dusting myself off. I landed in the only self pile of dirt in the mountain. And once he realized I was alive, he said, you got it in there, you get it out.
Korchak and Ruth believed in a strong work ethic and not handouts. They were so passionate about the humanitarian purpose of Crazy Horse that Korchak twice turned down $10 million in federal funding for the project. He did not believe the government would carry out the important cultural and educational goals or complete the mountain carving, which he knew would take much longer than one man's lifetime. Korchak passed away October 20th, 1982. Ruth and their children carried on the work with the books Korchak and Ruth created together and the scale models as their guides. Ruth served as the CEO of the Crazy Horse Memorial Foundation and was actively involved for the remainder of her life, providing leadership, inspiration, and a steady guiding hand.
Korchak, of course, was in charge of the mountain and did all of that, and even though we planned the books together, without him, there wouldn't be a Crazy Horse, and I'm perfectly willing to give him all that credit. But he said before he passed away that he couldn't carve Crazy Horses in grave, that there were things that we would have to do on our own and decisions that I would have to make. And one of the hardest decisions in the world, and it took 2 years to decide, after he passed away, was that we were not going to carve the horse's head, which is what Korchak would have done. We were going to do Crazy Horse's face first. And he left it so that a big share of the rock was gone in front of the face, and we had to clear it down to the arm and get ready to go to work on it. But it was far more ready to work on than the horse's head was. And looking back on it now, I know we've made the right decision.
The Indian's head emerged from the rock in the decade 1988 to 1998. Crazy Horse's head is 87 feet 6 inches high. Its dedication revealed the first finished work on the mountain. With a blast near Crazy Horse's left index finger that day, the focus of the work transitioned to the much larger task of blocking out the 219-foot horse's head. The outstretched left arm is 243 feet long. Crazy Horse's hand is 33 feet high. Over the next decade, work continued blasting out a series of benches, removing the millions of tons of rock from in front of the massive horse's head. As they drilled, blasted, and pushed the rock off from some of the biggest blasts ever on the mountain.
We're looking for people to come here and to be kind of a third generation. If you look at the family, we're to our fourth generation, actually, but we see visitors on the porch who will come in with a youngster yay big by their hand and say, you know, my parents brought me here when I was this size. Now I'm bigger than mine.
Ruth passed away May 21st, 2014. Progress of the dream, the mountain, and the humanitarian goals has continued with the second and third generation Jolkowski family members, the foundation board, and dedicated management and staff.
The crew has really moved a lot of rock in the past few years. The older crew members are passing on their knowledge to take all the precautions we need to carve the mountain. We stand on the shoulders of all the work of all the people that came before us. And we stand on Crazy Horse's shoulders and Henry Standing Bear and Mother and Dad and all the staff. We're just a stepping stone.
I feel the monument is a great tribute to the Indian. It would give us a better hold of ourselves as to who we are. And I think identity and individualism is essential to our Indian people. Hopefully this monument would create some idea in that direction.
It's a model, I think, of what's possible when there's an appreciation for the value, inherent value of the human lives who were here a long time, for centuries, before this country got established as the United States organized through immigration that came later.
It represents two things to me. It represents the integrity of our elders who asked Korshak to build a monument honoring one of our chiefs in our sacred Black Hills. And that is a commitment we should never lose sight of.
The Indian Museum of North America is home to an extraordinary collection of art and artifacts reflecting the diverse histories and cultures of the American Indian people, and speaking eloquently to present and future generations about American Indian life. The Mountain Carving Gallery shares more detail about the process of carving the mountain, including a display of tools used. The original studio home and workshop are filled with the family sculptures, artworks, and memorabilia. The Native American Educational and Cultural Center provides space for featured cultural programs and additional displays within the museum's collections.
This is really an opportunity to be able to share our culture. There's so much to learn.
We have an awful lot of amazing things, nearly 11,000 artifacts and items, art and history, from sculptures to photographs and all these things that really tell so many different stories of their own. We kind of enliven that spirit within each and every visitor, that they get to share in these stories, they get to become a part of this. That's really the neat thing that people take away from a visitation to a place like this, is that they become a part of that story as well.
Chief Henry Standing Bear and Korchak Jilkovsky agreed strongly that education is of the utmost importance in creating a better future for Native Americans. The story of the Indian University of North America began in earnest in 2009, when two large gifts catalyzed the progress. The first, a $2.5 million grant from the T. Denny Sanford Foundation to build a blended instructional and residential facility, and the second, a $5 million endowment from Muffy and Paul Kristen to fund the education efforts in perpetuity.
The Indian University of North America offers our students a truly distinctive experience. Our students carve a dream for themselves against the backdrop of this inspirational story. The students who have started with us, many have graduated from college, and they are giving back to the Native communities in which they live and work. We have served students from over 40 different Native nations. It's a big impact on their lives. It's big and iconic, like the mountain carving.
It is a really intense program, right? They receive 12 credits while also working 20 hours a week. They are constantly in class or running off to their internship up at the mountain. The university and Crazy Horse Memorial together, I believe, really help us to establish a network and build race relations. It's really important for us to educate and to teach the general public about the indigenous causes and helping our students to develop themselves as leaders so that they can better communicate what they're passionate about and find their gifts and utilize their talents. But we're really excited about having this opportunity to build and to grow and to foster the changes that are necessary for us as indigenous people and non-natives to learn more about us as well.
We want to protect the culture, we want to protect the heritage. When students come in here, remind them that this is still a place where you can hold the tradition sacred.
The spirit of Crazy Horse is so profound, not only because he stood for his people, he was a warrior, he led the Dakota communities into a very high position, but I think one thing that Crazy Horse stood for was the sustainability of our culture, of our language and our ceremonies. We have the job to protect our generations and our future children. So that's really what the carving means to the students.
Having the university here is important, and having it be a symbol for the indigenous populations is really important as well.
I also think that the Jilkovsky family is also essential in this experience, and that they share a great deal of their past triumphs and failures with the students as well, to help them realize that their goals can be achieved.
I think it's important for the public to know that there's a lot of heart and there's a lot of passion that goes into the Crazy Horse Memorial. It's a beacon to the world so that people can come from all walks of life and really recognize the work that's being done. Preserving Native culture and educating Native youth The Jakowski family is certainly dedicated and determined to help Native youth. There's generations of leaders coming through there to further their educational journey. They're going to go on to affect change throughout the world and be positive influences in a lot of lives.
Crazy Horse Memorial grows and evolves with the generations. Many visitors return year after year, generation after generation, to see the progress on the mountain and the growth of the educational, cultural, and humanitarian project. Mountain work continues to be funded by visitors and friends of the project who catch the vision. In a special sense, visitors become participants in that progress and become part of the exciting history in the making at Crazy Horse Memorial, a mountain carving, and so much more.
For Mom and Dad to be here today, I think Mother would be very pleased with how the university's going. She had such a soft heart for children and people that were a little down on their luck and everything, and she just wanted to help, especially children and young people. And I think she'd be pleased with how that is going. And I think Dad would be totally amazed with what's going on in the mountain and all the equipment and the tools and everything that everybody's learned. I think he'd be very impressed.
Some people might just come to see the mountain carving, but when they realize that there's a university and a museum, they're exposed to something they didn't even know about, and that's our opportunity to share with the world the Native American people and their cultures, past, present, and what's going on in the future.
I get to talk to so many people that just love the project, and it's really great to hear how much it means to them. I think it's righting a social injustice and trying to give back to the indigenous people of this continent, and so it's very rewarding.
We're telling the story Chief Henry standing there, Korjak and Ruth wanted to be told. I think Native Americans and the general public can come and understand that and take pride in what we're doing.
It'll take 100 years. What difference does it make? Isn't time relative? 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 year? I think I'll live long enough. When you drive up that road, you'll say, yes, sir. That is Crazy Horse. That's the story of the Indian people.
I want to right a little bit of the wrong that they did to me, because this is part of American history. You know, there's an old saying, and I've quoted it 2 or 3 times in my life, and it goes like this: when the legends die, dreams end. And when the dreams end, there is no more greatness.
Please exit beside the screen at the front